second going solo. This lesson is 2 days because it is a long lesson if you do it in the Google form like this. Just remember that you're going to want to submit it at one time. Don't leave the form and come back because you're most likely going to lose what you've worked on. You can see this painting here at the top. I don't know how much we've gone into what Doll is doing at this time, but today we're going to get a more specific look at where he's at and what he is doing. So far we've talked more about the different people that he's been around because he uses very descriptive language about them and uses their dialogue to show us who they are. And today we're going to get a look at another character in this scenery that they're in here. So go ahead and type your name and your section number. You can see underneath that part where we have a hurricane plane. These images are really to help you kind of picture what's going on and what these people are surrounded with. Again, this is a longer lesson. You have the reading here, which is a little bit longer than the other ones that we've been reading. We've kind of been really focusing on small pieces and pulling out that information from the text about the descriptions. But this is a bigger scene, and I think that some of you really like that because sometimes in the books we don't really get that much time with it, or like we don't get to read the whole picture of something. So here today we get a little more to read. Okay, so we're today going to focus on a new character that we haven't met yet. So our first question is, who is he talking to? And then kind of what are they talking about? What is the situation? So what's a kite? What are the crots? And also like what's the situation that they have in kind of what are they facing in this war? That is what we're going to look at first. We also have this as like an overall mood question about how it kind of seems as the corporal is describing that for Doll. So that's where we're going to start right now. So first we want to know, who is he talking to? We're going to start at the top. First encounter with a bandit. So this was Greece. And what a different place from the hot and sandy Egypt I had left behind me some 5 hours before. Over here it was springtime, and the sky a milky blue and the air just pleasantly warm. A gentle breeze was blowing in from the sea beyond Pyrrhus, and when I turned my head and looked inland, I saw only a couple miles away a range of massive, craggy mountains as bare as bones. An aerodrome I had landed on was no more than a grassy field, with wildflowers were blooming blue and yellow and red in their millions all around me. The two airmen who had helped lift my cramped body out of the cockpit of the Hurricane had been the most sympathetic. I leant against the wing of the plane and waited for the cramp to go out of my legs. A bit scrunched up there in there, were you? One of the airmen said. A bit, I said. Yes. You oughtn't be flying fighters, a chap your height, he said. What you want in a ready, great bomber where you can stretch out your legs? Yes, I said. You're right. This airman was a corporal. There's our first piece of information. He had taken my parachute out of the cockpit, and now he brought it over and placed it on the ground beside me. He stayed with me and was clear that he wanted to do some more talking. I don't see the point of it, he went on. You bring a brand new kite, there's our word kite, an absolutely spanking brand new kite straight from the factory, and you bring it all the way from Ready, Egypt to this godforsaken place, and what's going to happen to it? What? I said. It's come even further than Egypt, he cried. It's come all the way from England. That's where it's come from. And it's come all the way from England to Egypt and then all the way across the Med to this sodden country. And all for what? What's going to happen to it? So let's pause there. We know who he's talking to back up in this paragraph here. This airman was a corporal. So he's talking to a corporal in the military. That is our answer to our very first question. Now, the second one, what's a kite? So when he is talking to the corporal says, you bring a brand new kite. So we know that our narrator just came from Egypt because he just told us that. And the corporal saying that he brought the kite with him. He's also talking about that he is scrunched up in this plane, in this hurricane. So we can assume at this point that the kite, because it's up in the air, is the plane. Okay? And then we're going to move on to our next question. Who do the crowds seem to be? So we're going to get back to that in just a second. Okay? I'll tell you what's going to happen to it, the corporal said, working himself up. Crash, bang, wallop. Shot up in flames, exploding in the air. Ground strapped by the 109s right here where we're standing this very moment. Why, this kite won't last a week in this place. None of them do. Don't say that, I told him. I has to say it, he said, because it's the truth. But why such prophecies of doom, I asked. Who is going to do this to us? The Krauts, of course, he cried. The Krauts is pouring in here like ruddy ants. They've got 1,000 planes just the other side of the mountains. There, and what do we got? All right, then, I said. What have we got? I was interested to find out. It's pitiful what we got, the corporal said. Tell me, I said. What we've got is exactly what you can see on this ruddy field, he said. 14 hurricanes. No, it isn't. It's gone up to 15 now that you've brought this one out. I refused to believe him. Surely it wasn't possible that 15 hurricanes were all we had left in the fight in the whole of Greece. So we also learned that our narrator is in Greece and that they are fighting the crowds. Are you absolutely sure of this? I asked him, aghast. Am I lying? He said. Turning to the second airman. Please tell us, officer, whether I'm lying or whether it's the truth. It's the gospel truth, the second airman said. What about bombers? I said. There's about 4 clapped out blemons over there in that Minadini, the corporal said. And that's the lot. 4 Blenheims and 15 hurricanes. This is the entire ruddy RAF in the whole of Greece. Good Lord, I said. Give it another week, he went on, and every one of us will be pushed out into the sea and swimming for home. I hope you're wrong. There's 500 Kraut fighters and 500 Kraut bombers just around the corner, he went on. And what do I got to put up against them? We've got a miserable 15 hurricanes, and I'm mighty glad that I'm not the one that's flying them. If you had any sense at all, matey, you'd have stayed right where you were back in old Egypt. I could see that he was nervous. I couldn't blame him. The ground crew and the squadron and the fitters and the riggers were virtually non-combatants. They had never meant to be in the front line, and because of that, they were unarmed and had never been taught how to fight or defend themselves. In a situation like this, it was easier to be a pilot than one of the ground crew. The chance of survival might be a good deal slimmer for the pilot, but he had a splendid weapon to fight with. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. And so we answered this question and this quote 1 and 2, and then we're still wondering who are the crowds. We know that our narrators are fighting against the crowds. Our narrators are in the Royal Air Force because that's the RAF. If we look at our next question here, according to the corporal, the Germans have which are approaching okay, so how many planes do the Germans have, and how many do the British have? So our question is going to kind of inform us, but this is during the Second World War. So we have the Germans versus the British in this scene. So our people are of the Royal Air Force, so we know that they're British. So therefore, the Krauts, or the opposing Air Force, are the Germans. So if we go back up, we can find out how many planes the Germans have and how many planes the British have. I've already read it. Back up here. He said he had 500 Hurricanes and 500 bombers. That's how much the Krauts have. And so together, if we add those together, they said that they had, here it is here, that they had 1,000. And then if we go back up, they have 15 Hurricanes. So we know that our answer here, the Germans have 1,000 planes and the British have about 15 planes. So what type of situation is the corporal describing for a pilot like Dahl? Does he think that he is going to win out and they're going to go home and be safe, completely hopeful they're going to win the war? Is it somewhere in between, or is it all the way to completely hopeless? Does he find no hope at all for a pilot like Dahl? You're going to answer that on your own. So now we're going to look at the corporal's dialogue. We're going to copy 2 places that show how he is feeling. So first of all, we want to distinguish when he's talking versus when our narrator is talking or thinking. So here he's talking here about we've got 15 miserable hurricanes. I'm mighty glad that I'm not flying them. You should have stayed where you're at. So maybe that will tell us how he feels there. Maybe he feels that he'd be better off, Dahl would be better off not of coming here at all. So maybe use that one and another one there. And then we're going to find 2 places where Dahl, so this is the narrator, where he is telling us how he feels through the dialogue, or showing us how he feels through the dialogue, and we're going to copy 2 of those here. So again, make sure that 1 is dialogue, so it's in quotation marks, and that 2, Dahl is saying it. So whenever he says, I said, that would be when Dahl is saying it. So where does he tell us how he feels? So we have the corporal who is saying, well, we only have 15 planes. We might have 4 bombers. The Germans have 1,000 planes, a mix of 500 Hurricanes and 500 bombers. You shouldn't have come here. Like, this is not good for you. And then what do we keep getting from Dahl as the corporal keeps saying this? He keeps asking questions. Well, like, why do you say that? What about the bombers, right? You can't be sure of this. Like, he's kind of in disbelief at what the corporal is telling him. And that's most likely because he just came from training. He is brand new over here. So let's figure out, based on what he said, or what he says in the dialogue, how he feels. So if he says, are you absolutely sure of this? He's like kind of wondering, okay, well, maybe you're exaggerating the picture of it. So he may be hopeful that the picture is not like the corporal is saying, and he doesn't believe him. Okay, what is one thing you notice when you compare the corporal's dialogue to Dahl's? So when we talk about dialogue, there are a few things that the narrator can do in the dialogue to distinguish between characters. So if we look specifically at those 2 characters and how they talk, we could see that, like, here, for instance, is when the corporal is talking. He said, there's 500. Now, this little mark kind of shows us that He's cut off the H from the word. And so this is like a dialect, an indication of dialect or how someone talks. So when he talks, the voice sounds different than when Doll talks. Doll sounds a little more professional and maybe even naive as far as the content of what he's saying, and then also like he's still using proper English. Whereas the corporal has been out here for a long time. He's not using proper English anymore because we can see that he's dropped some of his letters, like the G on this word and the th on them. And if you had any sense, that's how we would say that. So he's been out here for a long time. He's lost all hope. And then he also is starting to lose kind of like more of a like professional tone. And he's more like talking like he would just talk to anybody that comes around. And he's the corporal, so he's like in charge of things. So it's kind of surprising. Our next question is, how does the text distinguish between Corporal's and Doll's personalities and emotional states? So again, like all of these kind of work together because you're using the dialogue to tell you so many things in this story. So when you're thinking about the Corporal's personality, right? What does he kind of feel like? Or like, is he formal or informal? Like, does he show you that he is like very hopeful, or is he kind of down and saying there's no way we're going to win this war? That would also go into his emotional state. Whereas Doll, he is very formal still in his language. He just came in for here, even though he doesn't have the rank that the corporal has. He talks more professionally than the corporal. But also, he has not been at war for very long. He just got there today, and he came from training. So not only is his dialogue, like what he's saying, or how he's saying things, more professional, it's also more hopeful, right? He is much more like questioning the corporal, like, this can't possibly be the truth, right? They talked a big game when they sent us over here. We'll be fine. Whereas the corporal is like, nah, this is not going to be okay.